Hello, this is Mike Regan, and I'm delighted to welcome you to another edition of our On the Record interview. And this may be one of the most important on the record interviews we've done for some time because we have some great resources to share with you about a topic that's vitally important to your transportation and supply chain areas, as well as your overall bottom line profitability. So with that thought in mind, I'd like to welcome Tracy Rosser and Bryan Boudreaux, who both worked at Walmart in some very heavy-duty capacities. Tracy was the Senior VP of Transportation for Walmart, and Bryan was the Senior VP for Walmart's Distribution Center Operations. And so I'd like to welcome you two gentlemen to this On the Record, and perhaps you could share with our audience some of the exciting things you're up to since your recent retirements from Walmart there.
Well, thanks, Mike. And I'm Bryan Boudreaux, and this is Tracy Rosser to my right. So Tracy and I have, Mike, started our own consulting company. We like to call it an advising company called Rousseau Supply Chain Advisors. And really what we're focused on is trying to help companies drive efficiency and lower their costs in their supply chains. So we're going to use the 50 plus years of experience we've got in supply chain and really 20 plus or 30 plus years in executive leadership at Walmart to help these companies drive efficiency in their supply chains.
Okay. Tracy, maybe you could give folks a little bit of background about some of the responsibilities you held there while you were at Walmart as well.
Sure. So thanks again, Mike, for the time. Tracy Rosser, and some of our more recent responsibilities, Mike had responsibility for global transportation, moving freight from market to market around the globe for Walmart. Had domestic transportation. Mostly that consists of moving freight from Walmart's vendor base to the distribution center network, whether it be general merchandise, the food network, or other specialty networks. And then the private fleet operation. So had responsibility for Walmart's private fleet operation, which we operated about 7,000 trucks, over 8,000 drivers, and 60,000 plus trailers moving freight. Primary mission is moving freight from DC to store and club, and then moving vendor freight back to the distribution centers. So that was the core of what we did. There was a time that I had last mile responsibilities, and then also our merchandise logistics responsibilities, where we had analysts working as a liaison between our suppliers, our supply chain organization, our merchant organization, to help our suppliers and our merchants get merchandise to the stores, lowest landed cost, best in stock positions.
Okay, and then Bryan, you had responsibility for the distribution center operations, which was the overall management of that and going from the DCs to the stores. Is that reasonably accurate?
You bet. So I had responsibility for both our general merchandise distribution centers and our grocery distribution centers, in addition to the pharmacy network here at Walmart. And so my grocery and regional responsibility was everything east of the Mississippi River. So in total, Mike, that was 50 distribution centers, 30 plus thousand associates helping us move that product through the distribution network at Walmart.
Okay, well, let's jump into the reason for this particular on the record interview. And Tracy, you and I have had numerous conversations over the past couple of years. In October, you were gracious enough to allow me to interview you, and we've had a couple thousand downloads on that interview for people that were interested in the way Walmart operates. And what triggered this particular interview was a conversation that you and I have been having about the whole issue of efficiencies, and in particular, we gravitated into the Walmart On Time In Full program, commonly referred to OTIF. And I shared with you the fact that last week, or 2 weeks ago, I was at the Food Shippers Conference, and I was having a panel discussion with some large shippers there. And what really caught just not my attention, but the attention of everybody in the audience, was when this director of transportation for a big time company was talking about the fact that 4 years ago, their fines were $3 million. And in 2018, their fines had grown to $24 million. And he was saying that that alone has caused an escalation within their organization that really encompasses not just the issue of fines, but our overall relationship with our customers. And then what further kind of triggered my interest in this was on Friday there, March 8th, the Wall Street Journal ran an article which highlighted that Walmart is going to basically tighten the parameters associated with their on-time and full program and what this could mean for Walmart suppliers. Well, you two are experts on this, and perhaps you could share with our audience and demystify what OTIF and prior to that, its predecessor, the must arrive by date program. What are those things really all about?
Gotcha. So I'm going to start with what it's really all about, Mike. And it's about driving sales, driving efficiency into the business and into the supply chain, and improving profitability. But I'll tell you what, there is so much leverage in a retail operation, whether it's Walmart or others, by just being in stock. And customer expectations today require and mandate that when they, give you their time to come shop a store or shop you online, that you have the merchandise they're looking for, and it's available when and where they want it, and at the price they deserve. And so it's all about driving sales, and it's not all just about driving sales for the retailer. It's about driving sales for the vendor and the supplier. So, it's really about those three things. And Mike, this has evolved over time. And think about it from a retailer perspective and from a supplier perspective as getting control of your supply chain. That's really what this is all about. It's getting control of your supply chain to achieve the best outcome for the end customer. And, several years ago, Walmart had the must arrive by date program. We had a broad window for freight to arrive at the distribution centers. I think I told you back in October, the original program was a 4-day arrival window on general merchandise. Walmart was getting that freight over 10 days, which is no way to run a business. You're either over.
Can I stop you just for a moment for
Sure.
the benefit of the audience? When you say a 4-day window, I think what you're talking about is 2 days prior to the required date and 2 days after.
That's exactly right, Mike. Thanks for the clarification there. And what was happening is that the arrivals were actually happening over a range of 5 days before and 5 days after. So depending on how the merchandise was flowing, if it was flow merchandise, that freight's moving on to the store if it's early and you're over inventorying the system in the stores. And if it's late and you're running an out of stock. And then what you're trying to do also to account for that wide array and range of freight movement is you create safety stock. You create it in the stores, you create it in other points in the distribution network. And so you got to think about this as a huge opportunity to grow sales, a huge opportunity to get control of your supply chain and reduce expenses, and also, like I said, improve profitability in the process, Mike. And I got to tell you something Bryan and I were talking about earlier. I don't like to think of this as OTIF. I like to think of it in a more logical sequence as in full first and on time. So if you're thinking about this program, what you want to inherently be in a position to do is fill the demand that your customer has first, and then once you've filled and met that demand, make sure that your deliveries are happening on time.
I got to tell you though, in time, in full, on time, IFOT just doesn't have the same.
It's not. It doesn't have. I tried to create something out of it, Mike, and it doesn't have the same swagger to it. I'll tell you.
Okay, well, let's move on a little bit, because when you went to the OTIF, not IFOT, but when you went to the OTIF program, you were talking about you tightened the window up from 2 days either side to 1 day. And in our interview in October, you were talking about how that impacted the whole relationship with suppliers in the increase of shipments that got there in full and on time, and how that impacted inventory. Could you share that with our audience there?
Yeah, I'll just tell you what gets measured gets managed. And once we started, once Walmart, and I'll tell you, Walmart's so smart for doing this and taking the lead in this initiative. because the model of reducing reducing cost and giving that back to the customer in price. Once that started to occur and we started to figure out where the constraints were in the supply chain, where the waste was in the supply chain, the company was in a position, and with the myriad of other strategies as well, to significantly reduce inventory at store level and across the distribution center network in a very, very meaningful way, Mike. And so particularly in a store, when you take inventory out of a retail store like a super center, you give that store oxygen. And you give those store operators room to breathe, room to find that item that may be in the back room or that needs to come from truck to side counter. You give that store the oxygen in the room they need to find the merchandise and get it to the side counter and replenish and be in stock. And so there was a tremendous amount of leverage there.
So if you don't mind me asking, Tracy, I think if this is inappropriate, we certainly can address that. I think you said you went from about 29% up into the low 70s?
Correct. That's absolutely correct in the OTIF measurement.
And I think you said that resulted in like billions of dollars of savings, like billions of dollars, not like a couple billion, but as in billions of dollars in reduced inventory carrying cost.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a specific number, but yes, it was in the B's, in the billions of reduction in inventory along with other inventory strategies.
Okay, Bryan, let's switch a little bit. We talk about, the impact that has on inventory. Talk about the efficiencies that OTIF has allowed Walmart to achieve in the DC operations area.
You bet, Mike. So, and I was kind of biting my tongue because I wanted to say this so bad. For a DC guy, variability is the devil, right? Variability drives costs in our operations. So by taking a window that could be 4 days or 8 days and shrinking that down to a day and hitting that with 75% reliability, we can plan our labor better. And certainly all suppliers, if you take the variability out of supply chain, out of when that merchandise is being shipped or being received, we can reduce labor costs by planning better. So I tell you, the number one gain from a distribution center network is taking waste out of the process. So scheduling labor, we all know, is getting harder and harder. These distribution jobs, just like truck driver jobs, Tracy, they're in demand, and it's harder and harder to fill. So if we can reduce the variability in our business, we're going to lower costs in our business. And we certainly saw that efficiency gain in Walmart distribution.
I don't want you to necessarily name a specific number, but are we talking like a couple million? Are we talking hundreds of millions in terms of increase, the reduction in cost through those efficiencies? What are we looking at?
Well, so Walmart is big, right? So scale is everything.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, Walmart is reasonably big. I don't know if it's really ginormous, but it's at least got some size and scale.
So we're talking tens of millions across the network just in taking that variability out of the network. It's just so important to know when shipments are going to arrive at a distribution center.
Can you also talk about the impact on your doors? I mean, one of the things I was sharing this whole issue of penalties, and one of the reasons why I'm thankful that you guys have carved out some time to address this. But, we were talking with the customer, and when you have a supplier that is taking 2 or 3 or 4 shipments to complete an order, as one of the directors of transportation for a company said, Mike, my job would be much easier if I knew that the quantity I ordered was going to get there on 1 truck instead of 3 trucks. Is that something when I can't even begin to imagine that across the scale that Walmart has, but could you briefly touch on why or lessons learned from OTIF and how it impacted your ability to get carriers into and out of your facility?
So you think about what Tracy talked about, in full. In full is super important. I can tell you that we would receive multiple shipments a day, Tracy, from folks like UPS and FedEx. And what those deliveries were, Mike, were just onesies and twosies of product that were not received on previous shipments. So we would have associates that would spend all day long muddling through thousands of POs on a particular trailer coming from UPS or FedEx because the shipment wasn't received in full. So all that wasted labor, wasted doors, and to Tracy's earlier point, possibly wasted sales. And that's really what what this metric is all about is driving inventory into the stores and making sure we've got the product that the customers want, when they want it, where they want it. So really that's the big metric is sales. But from a DC standpoint, OTIF is driving efficiency, not only in labor, but also in utilization of the assets in the building. So in a Walmart distribution center, for example, we've got automated lines, we've got manual unloading lines, and we can schedule the appropriate load to the appropriate door to increase that productivity inside of the building when we know with a good degree of certainty when a load is going to arrive.
Okay, so that's a pretty good understanding of OTIF. Now, let me ask you some more challenging questions, okay? Question number one, and when I brought this up at the Food Shippers Conference, and before that, Tracy, I was, fortunate enough to also moderate another panel discussion at the Stiefel Conference and had a gentleman, a contemporary of yours from Walmart there. One of the perceptions is that when Walmart or the other grocery retailers impose these programs, that it's just a quote-unquote penalty program. That really what you're really trying to do isn't necessarily to manage operations better, but is looking at it as another revenue source to ding your suppliers and, extract more monies from them. Speak to that myth, if you will, or address that issue to our audience.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a massive myth. And, again, I think any retailer, Walmart included, doesn't want to be allocating precious overhead and resources to managing a fine program. What they want and what all retailers want to do is serve their customer. And they're making a commitment to the customer every time they open those doors that they're going to have the product at the prices that the customer wants and deserves, because the competition is fierce today. If you're a retailer and you run out of stock, guess what you can do? Your customer is going to pull this thing out and order something that's going to be at their door either today or tomorrow. And I'll tell you what, that's the environment that the retailers are facing today. So there's a commitment to be in stock. And I guarantee you that any retailer would much rather be in stock than collect a penny of penalties. So that's the key. That's what this is all about. So do not be fooled by that myth. So sales and customer satisfaction is first and foremost.
Long before OTIF, Tracy, long before OTIF, as retailers, we were talking about in stock and making sure that we had that extra item for the customer. So, decades before OTIF, in retail, it's all about being in stock. And really, that's what this metric, that's what this measure is trying to ensure.
Yeah, and not only that, Mike, I would just add, in terms of satisfying a customer, any large retailer, just the absolute leverage again on the sales line of getting that one additional item in a customer's basket has tremendous leverage across the organization in terms of the type of sales comps that the organization can run. So again, there's way too much leverage to even spend a second talking about this just being a penalty program. It's so much more than that.
If I could take a sidebar here, but I think it's important for our audience to understand this, that when you're dealing with transportation, like you mentioned, one additional item in a cart at Walmart, what's that worth to Walmart? My wife's on the board of the Northwestern University Transportation Center, and UPS has been a big partner there, and he had some compelling presentation. UPS, I think Tracy and Bryan said that 5 minutes a day in a UPS truck, 5 minutes a day, I think the number they threw out was either $400 or $500 million. Rob Estes from Estes is a good friend of mine. He's had numerous interviews in our Perfect Storm Transportation Center. On one of our webinars, Tracy, he said one pallet position a day in an Estes truck, just one pallet position is worth $5 million to their bottom line. And so when you talk about leverage across the system, I think at times it may be worth your while for people to take a step back and say, if I make what is seemingly a small incremental change, what is that worth on an annualized basis? Any thoughts on that?
It's often said here, at least where we used to work, that a small number multiplied by a big number
Is a really big
is a big number. And we used to have a chief merchant that used to go around and talk about a buck at a time, right? If we could just add $1 more worth of merchandise in a customer's cart, we would significantly grow profitability. So not just sales, but profitability. So it's the buck at a time. It's that concept. It's really what Tracy and I are really trying to achieve, Mike, is focusing in on details and making sure all those details line up to support your business goals, the retailer's business goals. It's like retail is detail is another, saying we've heard throughout the years. And that's so important that you pay attention to the small details, because those small details end up costing your profitability at the end of the day.
Okay, let's switch gears now and get down to the real hardcore stuff. And that is, myth number 2. And this is something that I'm writing a blog on, and I hope to have it done soon. And that is, these must arrive by date programs, these OTIF programs, or as one of my customers calls them, the customer penalty program, whatever it is. It applies to the Walmarts of the world. It applies to the retailers of the world, the grocery products people like that. It's not really relevant for my business. And in my blog, which is basically the theme is, OTIF or a derivative OTIF is going from Broadway, AKA Bentonville, to Main Street. Can you address that for that person out there that is thinking, Mike, I really don't need to know that much about OTIF-oriented objectives?
Yeah, I'll take first stab at this, Bryan. So I think it transcends any industry. So when you think about
any industry?
Any industry, when you think any industry that has a supply chain, when you think about getting control of either your upstream or downstream supply chain, if you want to improve sales, reduce your cost and profitability as a company, this probably pertains to you. So, and I'll tell you, especially if the product that you are producing finds its way to an ultimate customer, to that ultimate customer in the marketplace, that customer is becoming more and more demanding. They want more of their products when they want them, where they want them, in a responsive way. And I'll tell you got to have an integrated end-to-end supply chain, both your inbound controls as well as your outbound controls that help achieve that customer experience. And so, Mike, I think it doesn't matter if you're a manufacturer of roll stock paper, you're going to have inputs into your business, and the more effectively and efficiently you manage the flow of those inputs to your production cycles, you're going to be able to overall improve your overall performance and reduce your cost through your production process. So whether I don't think it matters. I think it's a transferable concept and a distinctive competence that anybody can employ in any aspect of their business. And I think it's coming. I mean, it's just a matter of this drive to efficiency and supporting a customer that's becoming more and more and more demanding.
I think it's well said, Tracy. If you buy and sell anything, then on time and full makes sense, right? Because as a retail operation or supply chain operation, number one line items are going to be either inventory or labor. And driving on time and full helps you manage inventory and labor. And so, if it's about profitability, then I think on time and in full matters to you.
Yeah, and it's, Mike, it's synchronizing and harmonizing your business and your supply chain in a way that you can get benefit and gain business benefit. So I think it's highly transferable.
One of the reasons why, Tracy, I'm involved with a lot of different organizations and associations. One of the groups that I've shared with you, our Young Presidents Organization, has a group called the Manufacturing Excellence Network, and it's a couple thousand CEOs and presidents. And one of the key tenets that we talk about there in the MXN is the lean initiatives. We have all sorts of presentations from groups like the Lean Enterprise Institute and professors, et cetera. And one of the things, maybe you could address this in the context of OTIF, but one of the things that's been a mystery to me is that it seems like a lot of companies focus on lean within their walls, but they really don't extend that lean initiative out to interactions with their suppliers and with their customers. And to me, one of the reasons why I really wanted you and Bryan to share your insights on OTIF is it seems like to me, OTIF is a great conduit to apply to your suppliers, and then a conduit that helps you understand the expectations of your customers. And could you just briefly, am I going down the right trail with that thought, or am I off base there?
Yeah, I think you are, because it actually opens the door.
I'm off base or on the right trail?
On the right track. At least on this topic, you're on the right track. But I think it opens the door, Mike, to allow you to have the conversation. And Tracy and I were talking about lean this morning. We were talking about demand. And, if you've got to understand where you're having a shortfall in OTIF, you got to define the problem. You got to understand where, look at the data and understand where the problem is. And if it's upstream in your supply chain, then OTIF gives you the ability to have that conversation with your upstream supplier and say, you know what, we're trying to understand why we're failing. Here's the metric. We're not getting the product when we need it, so we can ship on to our end customer. So, I think OTIF allows you to go certainly upstream to the supplier. Obviously, you're getting the feedback downstream, from your customer, your retail customer in this case. So I just think it opens the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think when you look at, and Mike, I think about this in a couple of different ways. If you're going to look at your end-to-end supply chain, it's a mandate that you extend to your suppliers, and that you collaborate with your suppliers, and that you share data. Because what you're trying to do is find those areas of loss across the whole supply chain so that you can then take action against them. So to your point, I think it absolutely, it connects beyond your four walls of an organization, again, both upstream and downstream. And I hope that answers your question.
Well, and it does. One of the documents that we came out with a couple of weeks ago was our ebook on why companies need to develop a comprehensive transportation spend management plan. And Bryan, I think as you mentioned, if it doesn't get measured, it's not going to get managed. And one of the things that we think happens in transportation, Tracy, is, and maybe you could just speak briefly to this, is that we see companies that, for lack of a better way of saying it, need to reevaluate about how they're managing their transportation spend, because they're focused on carrier-specific issues, my pricing with my carriers, what happens with my doors. But what they're not looking at, and this is really important, are the issues across their supply chains that impact the consumption of freight. Yeah. So that if my fill rate drops from 96 to 85%, that has an impact on what my shipments are. If my sales minimum numbers haven't changed in a decade, that has an impact on what my weight breaks. And so what we're really encouraging people to do is to maybe take a look at OTIF, and the article in the journal brought this up. The bar's never going to be lowered. I don't see Walmart coming out a year from now and saying, kids, we were too tough. Now instead of 85%, we're going to allow you to go to 70%. And we'll have a discussion a year from now. If that's this is not like participation, you get a trophy. This is real world. If you want to interact with Walmart, you're going to play by Walmart rules. I spoke at the Home Depot Supply Chain Summit. Mark Hollifield does a great job there as their executive VP. One of the things they're talking about are Home Depot expectations. They're investing $1.5 billion into their supply chain over the next 5 years. They have expectations from their suppliers. So for those people that are saying, yeah, I get it, Mike, and maybe it's helpful, could you give them some words of encouragement about how they launch OTIF in their organizations? I get it, Mike, I get the concept and all, but where do we even begin? Because this is what I think the two of you, through your Rousseau supply chain initiatives, you're helping companies do to cut the ribbon and break the ground on laying the foundation for an OTIF program. Could you speak to that for me?
Yeah, Mike, you asked kind of two questions. One that
That's not surprising.
And I think it was framed up as if you're just managing rate, you can't just look at carrier rate. I mean, that's like if you're at a, running a retail operation or a store and you're just looking at your labor rate. So wage rates are always going to inflate, right, for the most part. And so transportation rates, there's going to be inflation that occurs in transportation over time. And so what you've got to do, and I'm sure everybody realizes this, but boy, given the last year and a half, I heard you say that in another one of your videos, don't let a good crisis go to waste. But I'll tell you what, this is a great time to get involved in other parts of your supply chain that ultimately can help you lower your total landed cost in moving product. And so I'm thinking about, how do you take miles out of your network? I think you had somebody in one of your videos and interviews, Mike, that said we ought to just stop shipping things. That's a way to reduce your transportation costs.
You bring down to zero. Just stop shipping and receiving.
But I would tell you that the least expensive mile is the one you don't run. And that's by making sure that you've got the right systems, you've got the right processes, your replenishment processes are spot on, economic order quantities are set right, that you are moving freight in full, and that truckloads, when you can move them truckloads and not having spill over to LTL or vice versa, or moving down the nodes, looking at where to leverage intermodal, looking at your supplier alignments, your DC alignments to stores, all those types of things that reduce network miles, running optimization, the right types of optimization to reduce miles. And there's so many ways to take cost out of the system. Packaging, I mean, you could just go on and on and on. And those are the types of things that organizations are getting into today because they need to and have to. And I'll tell you, if you're not looking at those things, then you're going to get left behind in a hurry, because you're not going to be able to put your products out there to market at the prices that your competitors can. But Mike, the other thing that you asked is, if you're new at OTIF, how do you think about installing the right disciplines? And Bryan and I have talked a lot about this kind of post Walmart and some of the things that we took a look at inside when we were both at Walmart. And I think the advice that I would give is, the first thing you got to do is change your mindset. You were talking about earlier that it's a fine program. Do not see this and view this as a fine program. This is a huge opportunity for you to set yourself apart as a supplier to your customer, and it is a huge opportunity for you to grow your sales and grow your profitability and take cost out of doing business. So look at the upside and the opportunity of doing so. And Walmart's absolutely right for shining the light on this, as well as other retailers. Then I would say demand planning. You got to understand what the work is that you've got to get done. What's being asked of your company, what's being asked of your supply chain. And you got to understand when that demand is going to occur, to what magnitude is it going to occur, and then geographically, where is that demand occurring? So having a really strong sense of your long-term demand and your tactical demand is critically important. And then, Bryan, we were talking about identifying failure points, assessing your supply chain, identifying where the failure points are, stratifying where those failure points are, and then putting the processes in place to correct those. Then we talked about network design, a healthy network assessment. We talked a little bit about that in the efficient alignments within your network. And then making sure you've got the right technology. So Mike, assessing technology's moving fast, and technological capabilities are moving fast, and producing what I think is also the output of cleaner, more timely data that can be applied in helping improve your business. So assessing your TMS, your WMS, how you manage data, your data governance policies, all those types of things that can help you assess and move quickly with your business. And then finally, having the right partners. Whether it's your 3PLs that you're doing business with, motor carriers you're doing business with, making sure that you've got partners that are aligned to the mission. And so those are the types of things that are pretty high level, but I think the right recipe and a starting place to really help improve your business processes.
Okay, let me just briefly recap this. And then, Bryan, I want you to speak to the follow-up question here. I think you said, first of all, you need to change your mindset. OTIF, is possible. Then take a look at your demand planning issues within your organization. Tracy, one of the things you highlighted that kind of, I talk to people, they say, oh, Mike, my supply chain's so complex, and this type of thing. And you were talking at Walmart in September, you knew that you were going to have to source 27 million miles of transportation the week before Thanksgiving.
Correct.
And I mentioned to people, if Walmart can, figure that out, that's pretty complex. Maybe you can figure it out. And they say, well, they're Walmart. But I said, yeah, but they're a lot bigger, more complex. Let's start with the basics. So I got demand planning, identify failure points, take a look at network design in the issue of alignment. And then I think you said the right technologies and clean your data, clean and timely data. I think you mentioned that. That's just real easy. You use TranzAct for freight pay, TMS, and all that stuff. Yeah. The right partners, that would be TranzAct too. But anyway, Bryan, help me understand this. I'm looking at this and I'm going, what am I signing up for? And maybe what would help me understand this issue, Traction is a big book that's going on right now. Gino Wickman's book, Traction, and we talked about eliminating friction within the organization. Maybe you could say, there is a possibility, and if I need motivation, should I be worried about the fact that if I don't do it and my competitors do, that puts me potentially at a really significant disadvantage? Can you just address that and give these CEOs and these logisticians and supply chain professionals a word of encouragement?
You bet. Well, the world, I think you mentioned it, Tracy, systems are changing. The world is changing. Customer demands are changing. And if companies don't change to support those changing demands of the customer, then they go away, unfortunately. And we're seeing that with Sears, Toys R Us. I mean, some pretty big retailers have gone away this last 6 months, and more on the way. And the only way to combat that, Mike, is to change and to be open to change and find ways to exceed the expectations of your customer. So I don't know if that's encouragement, but I would say that, being open to change and grabbing hold of this process and seeing how you can turn it into a positive versus a fine, right? Reducing fines is one thing, but driving sales is quite the other. So I look at this more of a positive slant than I do a negative slant.
Let me just kind of wrap this up. I mean, obviously, Tracy, we had the privilege of serving Walmart for several years back, putting the freight pay and the rating engine, that type of stuff. One of the things that always impressed me about Walmart was the can-do spirit. And we had another retailer that came on board with this at the same time. They took 18 months to get started, and it got started because a guy walked in, a senior VP, and said, we're pulling the plug on our system. It goes to TranzAct, and created mass chaos. Walmart made the decision. 90 days later, they were up and running, a couple glitches, but it got it humming. And so maybe you could just wrap it up by talking about, if I'm interested in getting this done, help me understand how, your firm can get me, like I said, get the shovel on the ground, cut the ribbon, get the building built. What should I expect when I bring you guys in to talk with you?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is visiting with your team and getting a rapid assessment of where the failure points are. And so a plan can be devised quickly, identifying those areas that have leverage that can be acted upon immediately, Mike, to really make a difference in the process. And knowing that your teams are very capable of executing this, I think is really important to understand. I think it may be just a different set of eyes to help lead the way. Can maybe get you there and make a big difference in a short time frame.
I'd add this, Tracy, that Tracy and I are operators. We are not consultants. We have done what we're talking about here at Walmart for the last 20 plus years. Well,
that would automatically disqualify you as a consultant. Sorry to all you consultants out there. I are one, so I have to be careful what I say.
Yeah, and I think we understand what's executable and what can be done quickly and what can't. and what needs further planning. And so I think that's one of the unique things that we bring to bear.
And, you know, Tracy, one final point. You mentioned change the mindset. My concern, and it's something that on our global, you know, our Perfect Storm webinars, guys like Dave Yeager, who's the CEO of Hub Group, and some others, you know, Darren Hawkins, CEO of YRC. One of the things they bring up on the webinars is that, you know, if your organization does not have a DNA that's genetically predisposed to change, you as the leader really need to address that issue head on. And I think that's something that perhaps y'all could help some of these leaders get their arms around. Am I right on with that, you know, right in that assessment?
Absolutely.
There's one thing constant that we grew up with, one thing constant, it's change. And you've got to be able to adapt to it.
Yeah. You know, one final point, Bryan, I just want to bring up. On our last webinar, both the gentleman from Pitt, Ohio and Penske said that if you wanted to take 3 to 5% of your transportation costs out of the equation, like overnight, focus on what's going on at your DCs and warehouses, as well as the warehouses and DCs for your suppliers and customers. And I think that's another initiative, byproduct of an OTIF orientation, by identifying the failure points. Because I will tell you, I was just on a call prior to this one, talking with the truckload carrier, and they made no mistake about it. You don't have carrier boycotts, you have driver boycotts. You have drivers that basically tell the carrier, you put me in there, I'll go work for somebody else. And I just want to close maybe with that hope for a better future. And I want to say thank you. Thank you very much for your time. This has really been a very compelling interview. So any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Thank you for the time, Mike.
No, thanks for your time, Mike.